Libby, with you.
Is that with me?
Yeah,
Sure.
Right. But a couple of things first. Just think about the sort of things that we've talked about already. Do you have something that you want to know about? Because what Libby's talked about doing is she's going to do just a part of what she's got to talk about today, and then she's going to be inviting you to sort of engage in some conversation with her.
Yeah, we'll sort of try and make it a bit more interactive than just a lecture we can all go to sleep. So we don't want any of that happening today.
I'll be watching.
It's a small group, so we can keep an eye on all of you. But yeah, thank you, Jane, so much for your warm welcome, and thanks, Robin, for inviting me on board. Yeah, as Jane said, I've been in the area for 20 years now, operating as a vet. Except for a little interlude, I went down to Hunter Valley and did some horsey stuff. But basically, I've been a Northern Australian cattle vet my whole career. And this reproductive performance is a big passion of mine. As alluded to before, my husband runs a Brahman stud, so fertility is a big thing that we focus on, and making sure that we're providing bulls that are fertile and will go out and work in a commercial sense. And so it all sort of flows in, it's all nice integrated right through how we work. And yeah, I'm always available for questions. So even if I'm not your vet, Jane or Robin has my contact details, so do reach out, and I'm happy to help you through any problems you have going forwards. So yeah, as Jerry said, we're going to make this a little bit stop-starty. So I'll do a little segment, then we'll have a bit of discussion. Tell me what you think about what I've got to say. A lot of what I've got presented is scientific data. So compared to your PDS, where you're giving slightly different numbers to either higher or lower depending on where you live. So or what I'm presenting now is the science, but real life is often quite different to that. So the principles of heifer management, we've still talked about this a little bit already today about knowing our objectives. So whether it's just for our PDS, we want to know what we're trying to achieve. With a business, are we turning off 2-year-old steers, 4-year-old bullocks? What's our end point? We also talked a little bit about realistically, we're grass farmers, we turn into beef. So all the steps along the line. So getting a calf on the ground, making it a replacement heifer, getting it back in calf, getting your end product to the market. It's all interrelated. The learns from mental blank. The Girl Power project, are going to help us in this project moving forwards, and taking that to the next level. So the hardest thing a cow ever does is get back in calf the second time. So that the Weaning mate in your Wagyus is easy. The 2-year-old join, on your desert heifers, that's it's relatively easy. But getting them back in calf that second time, that's where the major challenge is. And if we can get these cows through that second calf in a positive body score and going forwards, they'll keep cycling and keep producing for us into the future. But at the same time, we need to balance this out cost effectively. So, it's not cost effective to feed these cattle right through, whether it's a drought year or a good year. So we need to work out what's going to work in everybody's individual situations and make that a cost-benefit relationship for yourself. I know Robert mentioned about going from 75% calving to an 8% calving, and while it's if you're sitting down at the 40%, we can make a huge shift to 60 or 70. But once you're in that nearly at that optimum range, we're looking for our 1%ers to try and just get that little bit to where we want to be. I remember when I first started in Charter Sows 20 years ago, my boss said to me that we're looking for 85% conception is about as good as you can get in that goldfields country. Any more than that, the input costs exceed what you're going to get back. So it's all going to be different. If you're in ice cream country with fat black heifers, you're looking for a 98% conception rate. Otherwise, you're not going to be happy. But for us with our Brahmins in the northern forest country, that's dreaming. It's not possible. So these are all the different things that we can do to look at our management and how we can change things. I won't cover all these things today. So we've got our grazing management from the Girl Power. Supplements, I'm not going to get too far into that. I'm not a nutritionist. My sister is an ag scientist and she tells me very much so that vets know nothing about nutrition. But I've picked up a few little things along the way, so we'll talk briefly at that, but I'm not going to get into, whether it's being phosphorus or sulfur or salt, or that's not my field of expertise right now. The mating age, we've talked a little bit about that this morning, and I'm presenting some of the recent research on that. Talking about mating periods, so going from controlled to continuous to controlled mating, using your pregnancy diagnosis and timing your weaning. I'm not going to go too much into the health and stress situation, the vaccines and biosecurity. That's a whole other kettle of fish we could probably use for a different meeting down the track. And I will touch on some new research on the number of bulls that we need. Alrighty, so I think I've sort of doubled up on this. So, but yeah, good mating outcomes drive our profitability. So making the maximum kilos of beef per breeder per year is one of the markers that we should be looking at for our management practices. So as I said, they've got to align with your management, your production goals. So whether we're looking at turning off yearlings or 2-year-olds, growing them right out, putting them into feedlots. So we need to know where our end goals are. And by using that, we optimise our genetics, our bull selection, how we manage our lactation, and our overall herd health. And through this, we've got to optimise our feed base. So whether it's rotational grazing, using supplements, different infrastructure, laneways, yards, but all doing this within a cost-effective system. Right, so lactation and breeding is sort of going to be the focus of today's talk mostly. So we're looking at our mating age, using pregnancy diagnosis, weaning, using combining your weaning for pregnancy diagnosis for culling and management of your cows, and balancing that with your cow body condition score, which will determine whether they'll go back in calf or not. So scientifically, we're looking at that average puberty weight of 320 kilos, but that can be up to 50 kilos difference. The difference in that 50 kilos is more within breeds than between breeds. So by definition, that's what 50% of our cows have reached puberty at that 320 kilos plus or minus 50 kilos. So it could be up to 370 kilos, in a herd that's got either poor genetics or poor nutrition. You have a problem?
What's your definition of puberty?
So puberty is when a cow has reached puberty when she has had a cycle. So by ultrasound, we diagnose that when they have a CL on their ovary. They can have a couple of sort of false cycles coming up, so you can't just say they're standing, they've reached puberty. It's when, scientifically, they have a CL on their ovary, that's when they have reached puberty. So the variation within breeds can actually be 5 times variation between breeds. So, Brahmins are not Brahmins. They say, Charolais conceive later because they're a bigger breed, but within that breed, there's 5 times the difference between a Brahmin and a Charolais.
Would age come into it much, or is it kind of just weight, really?
Yes, age and weight do come into it, but that comes back to your growth rate. I do have a slide I can show you later I didn't put in here, and it shows how they're grown over time and when they actually reach that puberty weight. So if they do take, if they have a poor nutrition, it delays puberty. So if I have my herd, in a good year, they'll reach puberty at say 320 kilos, but in a bad year, and so they reach puberty at 320 kilos at 18 months, but in a bad year, it's going to take them to 340 kilos at 26 months, because it's just taken them longer to grow out and reach that weight. So yeah, having that consistent growth from weaning right through till the first join is so essential for heifers. One of the things that I hate to see when I go around is that people take their steers and put them in the best paddock because they're your cash cow, and they leave the heifers in the back paddock. So they, the mums have done a pretty good job on them, got them, weaning up well, and they wean them. Hopefully they've done a reasonable job on weaning them, keep them going ahead during the weaning paddock. Then they throw them out in the spinifex and forget about them for 12 months. So they've come up and then they've crashed off and then they've got to come back up again. If we can keep them growing consistently, not necessarily fast, but just that consistent growth, right through until that first join, they'll have a much better production throughout their lives.
What is it for OREC maintenance?
Sorry?
What is it for OREC maintenance? Is there a difference in there?
I can't give you an exact answer to that, but definitely not below maintenance. So yeah, they're just. I think if anything, it's hard to be at maintenance because they are. Like, as soon as you like, even for business, you stop growing is when you start going backwards. So they are growing. So if they're not putting on live weight, they're losing body score. So they do have to be, even if it's only 100 grams a day, they've just got to be inching that little bit up because they are growing, that couple of mils every day. And as soon as you say, okay, I'm just going to keep them at 320 kilos, because they're still growing up, they're losing body score. And it's the body score that's as important as their relative body weight. So Jeffrey Fordyce, he's one of the gurus of cattle reproduction in the north. He's been researching it for as long as I've been alive. And his latest project, they looked at hip height and body score as two of their key markers. So keeping that body score the same and watching that hip height grow. So it's not the absolute weight that matters, but it sort of works into almost a frame score that's continuing to grow. Then we talked a little bit earlier about yearling mating versus your 2-year-old mating risks. So there's no benefit in going for a yearling mate unless you've got 60% of those yearlings that are going to conceive in that year. If you're not going to get 60% of your yearlings pregnant, you're better off holding them all off to the second years. That comes due to the cost in live weight, as Robert mentioned. Those heifers, his heifers are losing 65 kilos from the day they calve to the day they to the next time they come through. And Jeffrey Fordyce was talking around the 35, so it's obviously a environmental difference. But if they lose that 35 kilos, they've got to put that back on before they can go and calf again. So between your yearling join, when they are a 2-year-old trying to go back in calf, they're still going through a rapid growth expansion. So your cows will grow until they're about 4.5 years old. So we want to keep them, growing. If we, but it's an exponential curve. So they grow rapidly and then they slow down as they reach in that 4.5. So in that 2.5 to 3.5, they're still growing really rapidly and trying to get back in calf. As we get them, closer to that 27-month join to a 3-year-old calf, there's not that much growth, in that postpartum period. So it's not as hard for them to. They will still lose weight, but a heifer will lose a whole body condition score more than a cow will in that period. So she's lost her body condition score, and she's trying to grow, and she's got to put that weight back on so she can get back in calf. So all these things sort of add together. We've also got the problems of dystocias with heifers because you're putting a relatively the same size calf in a smaller body. So not much more attention needs to be paid to your yearling joins. From the Wagyu point of view, I do a lot of Wagyu work, but I did have a client that he'd been around a few vets trying to find someone to do Wagyu AIs down to 170 kilos, and speaking to the people who do a lot of it, said yes, you'll get them in calf, but you'll pay for that in 12 months' time when you have dystocias, or even getting them back in calf that second time is quite a lot harder. So that's where I'm going to have my first stop. Anybody got some thoughts, questions? Yeah, Jordan?
What are your thoughts around dystocias with yearlings versus 2-year-olds, and I guess helping with nutrition, like giving them some nutritional support, whether that has a lingering effect on dystocias? Have you found that?
So your number one reason for getting dystocias in heifers is they call it feto-maternal disproportionism. So your calf is too large for your dam. The absolute worst thing you can do is look at your heifers, say you're going to calve at Christmas time, you look at them in September, it's like, they're all too small and skinny. I'm going to feed them now. So most of the calf growth occurs in that last trimester. So we're trying to feed our heifers up. We've left a little bit too late. They're probably going to get fat rather than grow. So we've got the fat inside the pelvis. We've told the calf it's going to be a great year, so he's going to grow. And so he's now larger than he would have been from that point of view. So I will talk about this a bit further on, hopefully if I haven't got myself confused. But the nutrition, right through that whole pregnancy and keeping, same with our, from weaning to joining, keeping that steady growth and trying to keep it consistent right through. It's new research to me that just talks about the feeding during, between weaning and, the last trimester. There's some really cool epigenetic effects on that. And, historically it's like, once you've got them a calf, you can forget about them for a while, stop feeding them. And then, we know that it takes 120 days for an egg to hatch. So we want them to go and calve, a couple of months after they've calved. So we've got to feed them back for, 120 days before then. But if we don't, the calf that's in the utero it's developing is impacted by the nutritional stresses on that cow in that early pregnancy. So it's a slow, steady burn for everything. Yeah, don't spike them, please. Not unless you want to pull 80% of your calves.
Yeah, the biggest death rate we ever had.
The longer I'm in this job and the more learning I do, the more I'm amazed we actually get calves on the ground. So there's so many things that can go wrong. There's so many things that I've done wrong, and it's like, I should have known better. But yeah, just in the heat of the moment, you make a decision and you talking about simple shit that you can do yourself. And we talked a bit before about data analysis. This is a spreadsheet that we quite often use in the yards when we're doing our pregnancy diagnosis. So up the side here, we've just got our body condition score. So 2 being your light cows. I haven't put the 1s in there because they're just not even going to be in calf. Our 5s are our overfats. And I've just split this in the first, second and third trimesters. You could do it down to the month if you really wanted to. And all it involves is, putting a tally mark in where the cows are. So you end up with, a really quick diagnosis of where all your calves are going to come. You've got another one down here. And it becomes very pictorial. And you don't have to be able to analyse any data on the computer to see that, our fatter cows are more in calf than our skinnier cows. They're a bit later conceiving. We've had, one here that is out of season. She found a bull elsewhere. And we know from this that, we've got most of our calves are going to come, in the ideal time. So by the time you do your 200, 300, 400 cows, you have a nice, a picture you can see without even, pulling out a calculator, and yep, we've got all of our calves are going to come in the right time. You can see if there's a nutritional impact, and the skinnier ones aren't in calf, whereas the 3s and 4s are where we want them to be. They're doing well. They're getting there. They're in calf. I should have put an empty box over here.
Yeah.
0. Yeah.
What's that one?
Empty. And I've got one fat cow here that's fat and dry, just to make it look realistic. So, it's really, really simple, really easy. And you can even just do that in a straight yes/no pattern if you're not worrying about fetal aging. It just gives you quick, easy data analysis that anybody can do without.
So this is something that's not controlled mating.
Yeah. So if you control mating, you can still go, yes, no, and look at your body scores. So then are these cows suffering nutritionally? Is that why we've got more 2s who are empty than 4s who are empty? And just gives you that quick, easy answer as to, or an answer. May not be the answer, but it gives you an idea, something to start with, and where you can work from there.
The last lot I did, I do something similar, but in retrospect, I really thought I should have done it long enough with when we had rain, because I think of it like that's that rain bed, that's that rain bed, that's that rain
Yeah, well, then you go back and as I said last night, quite often when I go out to do preg testing, people say, "Oh, I don't want you to do any fetal aging," but I always do it in my head because they're going to ask me at some point in the day, when are my calves going to be born? And yeah, I guess because they're not going to do anything with their management, so that to them, me splitting into piles is not going to help them, but they do still need to know. So. You can, and as part of my role, I do, keep a little bank of the weather conditions in my head. So I know we had good rain. We didn't get rain in February. We got rain in March. So I go out and start, probably going to start looking for pregnancies. Just a big pile to come in May because they've got to wait rain, they've got grass, they've got to start cycling, and it's got 6 weeks till I can diagnose it. So. If I don't get any, bulk pregnancies till the end of May, I'm not overly concerned because the first half of the year was so hard. And then, as Bob I did, recently, they've had a pregnancy, conception problem, and again he just said no, just yes, no, it's fine. But we had a bulk of them in the third trimester and a bulk in the first trimester, and there's hardly anything in the second trimester. So, and they were weaned 4 months earlier. So, I expect cows to start cycling pretty soon after they're weaned. They're in pretty good body order, so it wasn't a nutritional problem. So that tells me these cows have conceived, probably lost their calf and gone back in calf a second time, because it's a big gap in the middle. So you've got your histogram, and an ideal situation we get most of them straight up when the bulls go out, and then slowly taper off. Whereas if we're getting a double humped camel, we've got a fetal loss problem in there somewhere. So all this stuff gives me data, and it's why as vets we like to call it pregnancy diagnosis rather than pregnancy testing, because I'm diagnosing the problems while I'm going on.
When we say fetal loss in the gut in the middle there.
Yeah. So we've done blood testing. I haven't got the results back yet, but things like Pasture, lepto, vibrio, trike, they're all the big ones we start looking for. And then there's Neospora and Akabani as well that throw in there. They're fairly well endemic now, unless you have your true suspicion of them. It's pretty hard to. Neospora and Akabani, they're pretty much everywhere. Neospora is spread by feral dogs. Akabani is spread by mosquitoes, so they're pretty much endemic across the country. So unless I've got a true suspicion that is the problem, it's pretty hard to get the testing done for that.
I've done some fertility loss investigations through the department in a couple of places, and Neospora was quite
Prevalent?
prevalent. Yeah, and to the point that I think the lab sort of said that they're not really going to test for it until it's everything.
Is it a vaccine group?
No. It's got to control. Yeah, you got to control your dogs and keep them away from the cattle water. So
And what's this?
it doesn't do anything to the dogs themselves. They're the secondary host. So the dog poos on the water. The cow eats the contaminated grass, and then it tracks up, and then it flows through to the placenta. The infected calf is expelled. Dingo eats dead calf, starts the cycle again. So,
Feed fish through water?
yeah, water or grass, but yeah,
So if one's got a pretty good.
more or less, yeah. If you've got a big dog problem, then yeah, it's going to be right through.
Does it affect a specific trimester?
It does, but I haven't got that number on top of my mouth right now. Courtney, no. I think it's that second trimester from memory, but don't quote me on that one. Alrighty, so move on to our First-Calvers. So as we said before, their skeleton's maturing at about 4.5 years, so they're still growing. They're trying to reconceive. They're trying to regain that body weight, and any nutritional stress will lead to a reduced body score, which leads to a lower reconception rate. We often sort of feel about them being less fertile, but that's an illusion. So we can be culling them unnecessarily for something that's not their fault. Did you have a question, Neil? No, just shooting flies. And they've shown that it can actually be profitable to retain those heifers that don't calve in that second year, and then they'll regain that body score and calve in the third year. I know AACO runs a program where they want 2 calves out of the first 3 years, so they conceive as heifers, and they can skip a year. They've got to have that third year, or they can have skip 1 and go 2 in a row. But as long as they've got 2 in that first 3 years, then they're actually productive members of society and are worth continuing on with. But you've got to combine that, looking at your body score. If they're fat and wet and empty, then it's obviously not a nutritional problem. They're obviously growing and handling conditions well, so they're the ones that probably are less fertile than the ones that are, have had that body weight and haven't been able to regain that body score in time to meet the bull. So yeah, same as Rob was using their past and potential live weight production. So you know what they were and then what they are, and unless they've gotten back to what they were, they're not going to reconceive. They actually need to be what they were plus another 35 kilos on average for that next year. So unless they're somewhere in that band, it's our fault and nature's fault that they haven't reconceived rather than their own. So we can sometimes give them a leave pass. But you need to sort of combine that, with your management programs and use your effective decision making for that. So the ones that don't go back in calf, they'll spend that year growing out, and they'll reach that full size cow sooner. So then they've got this bank of extra live weight that they can use in subsequent pregnancies. So they're not losing too much each year because they've done their growing in that year, and so they're just losing that little bit, then going back up rather than going right down and having to claw their way back to normality. So what we've shown is if we can, these First-Calvers, if we can pull them off in their own paddock and wean them with their calves that are lighter weight than the adult cows, it avoids that massive loss of body score. So that nutritional stress isn't as bad. So I said earlier, if your cow will lose, go from a body score of 3.5 to 2.5 during that lactation period, a first calf heifer will go from a 3.5 down to a 2 or a 1.5 in that same period if you wean at the same weight. So if possible, we can try and wean those heifers, the heifers at a younger age. So are you familiar with the process of working out your weaning weight, so based on your yearling growth for the year? So comparing Robert and Ramo, you're sitting quite nicely next to each other, so it makes my life really easy. So we talked about how much live weight you can put on your yearlings in a year, and you get them up to this weight. Your Robert's yearlings are only down here. So if you've got country that does you'll put 170 kilos on a yearling steer in the year, that is the number that you then use to work out your weaning weight. So you add about 50 kilos of that for your calf. So you're looking at a 220 kilo weaner is your average target. Whereas if you've got country that'll do 230 kilos on your weaner, on your yearling steer, you can go up to a 280 kilo weaner. But if we're looking at our First-Calvers, we're probably better looking at dropping off that 50 kilos, and I'm getting 170 kilos on my yearling steer, so that's my average weaning weight. So if you can pull your heifers off earlier, and that saves, because that extra 50 kilos comes off her back, but it doesn't actually change the amount of. Yeah, her help. It comes out of her. It doesn't come out of the grass. It comes out of her because she's trying to. Yeah, and a cow will lose up to 2 kilos a day when they're lactating. So the longer we leave those calves on those heifers, we're just going to pull them back when they're supposed to be growing and maintaining. So it's quite suitable. But we're looking at our overall live weight production per cow per year. It's not going to be affected grossly because, like you said, that little weaner there, he's so much cheaper to feed. He's a half a dry cow equivalent. Your wet cow is a 2.2 cow equivalent. So you can pour the feed into him for half the money. And yeah, So yeah, it is. Yeah, he's 4 or 5, 20 to 25% of that cow and calf as a combined, how much they need to eat.
So how do you see that creep feeding, like the money you put on a creep feeding cost comes out in dividends?
Yeah, it does. We can wean our calves, down to 150 kilos, and put them in their own paddock, and feed them, energy dense feed, so some molasses or protein meals or grains, to get them up to your normal weaning weight. And if you do have 2 different populations of calves, keep your little ones over here and your bigger ones over there, so they're not getting bullied away from the feed troughs. But anything we do, again, we look at our cost benefits on that. So I'm just going to pause halfway through this slide and just stop for any questions and comments. Yeah, and it is definitely a luxury to have. You have your weaner paddock, then you have your heifer paddock, then you have your first calf paddock, and then they go to the cow mob. And not everybody has that luxury, and we ourselves don't. So, we've got a weaner paddock. We keep the heifers through until they're joining age, and then they go with the cows. And unfortunately, we've got to manage them. But if we notice those heifers are doing it tougher, we'll do an early round, pull the heifer calves off, and any cows that aren't coping well, and then leave the rest until our real weaning date. So you can, depending on the size of the operation, and obviously, if you're at Strathmore, that's not an option, and you wean when you get your contract crews in, and that's what it is. But when you're on the smaller holdings, it's possible to just go out and pull a few off, and not to the detriment of the cows. Walking 20 k's into the yards, then that's another option too. So you can do things, of putting trap yards in the paddock, and pull off the calves there, so they don't have to walk the whole mob in and stuff like that. So there's plenty. In an ideal world, those cows that are not managing that calf, we don't want them to reconceive again and have that same problem again next year. If they haven't handled it as a 9-year-old, they're not going to handle it as a 10-year-old, and definitely going to handle it as an 11-year-old. And sooner or later, you're going to have a dead cow in the paddock. So if you can early wean, and then let that cow freshen up, you just got to make sure you know who she is when you come through at preg testing. Even if she's pregnant, she needs to go to the fat paddock and get rid of her. So, yeah, Robert?
Let's go back to, you're talking about the up to the 4.5 years, growing up to 4.5 years, and they need to get back to their first joining weight plus 35 kilos to be
Yeah.
up to what age?
Depending on the cow, the average is 4.5, so somewhere between 3.5 and 5.5. That's when they stop growing.
So a 3-year-old cow, you're still wanting to be 35 kilos.
Yeah, she's still putting on body weight. She may not be growing as much, but she'll start be growing.
So even though the growth curve has come back, she still needs to be above.
Yeah, she still needs to be up above where she was. So as I said, we've got that bell curve. So it might be 35 in the yearling to the first and second calvers, might be only 20 in the next year. But they've just got that constant growth there. All right, so we talked about weaning our calves early, and I just want to talk a little bit about going back to the question on spike feeding, and when is it worth doing, and when is it not? So we do know that energy dense feeds can boost puberty and bring it in sooner. So we can feed all our heifers and get them there sooner, but it is possible to go too far with that. So our ideal is to put on about 30 kilos on these heifers, through feeding. If we put on 60 kilos, there's about 30 kilos of fat there that they're not going to use, so they're just going to lose that as fat. So that's wasted inputs. So everything we put in, we're talking about turning it into beef at the end of the day. So if we're overfeeding our heifers and making them fat, that fat's just going to melt. It's not actually going to go into the calf or the pregnancy or your beef at the end of the day. So we need to make sure we grow them well, but not make them fat. It has shown that a 6 week of spike feeding for heifers, can raise their fertility by up to 20%, which is, but only in a controlled mating situation. So if you've got a year-round system, there's no point putting out 30 kilos on them, coming up to Christmas if they're not going to conceive until May, because that's all gone. So in a short join, 6 weeks of spike feeding will give you 20% increase in fertility, but otherwise it's not profitable. I've talked about that.
Is it 30% on the 320 or the
30 kilos is the number that I've got.
kilos on the critical mating weight?
To get them to the critical mating weight. So we don't want to, if we're pushing them above that, we're just, working on fat rather than muscle.
What about calf removal of lactation for 23 hours?
Yeah, that's something that I do play around with quite a lot when we're doing fixed time AI programs. So 24, 48 hours, will trick the cow into thinking that she's weaned. So if you do have a problem with lactational and estrus, that will spike, trigger cycling. For you with Wagyus, I wouldn't have thought that lactational and estrus is a problem. For me with Brahmins, it definitely is. And yeah, it's look, even anecdotally, I can't say that I've seen a big difference in my programs, and it's because I just do that every year for the last 10 years. But any of these things, we're talking about our 1 to 5%ers. So we're just going to add that little bit, and they've got to have that egg almost ready to go for that to really work. But it is scientifically proven to be of benefit, but I wouldn't expect it to be more than a few percent. It's not going to be 20 or 30% more.
Will the spike feeding work on the 120 days before to help the egg and stuff?
Yes, let me just slide on to my next slide here. So the nutrition, we don't want to spike them, but we want them to feed well. So we talked before, by spiking them, you can make them fat, you make the calf grow. But we need to have them growing, definitely not losing weight in that last trimester, holding, also, inching forwards. So the cool new stuff that we're learning is that the nutrition, right throughout the pregnancy, has significant impacts on the next generation and the next one, as well as that cow's own ability to reconceive. So, by looking after that cow all the way through, we're going to end up, more pregnancies, from her and from her offspring, for generations. Yeah, it is epigenetics. It's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't know. Sorry, Darren. But so if you, you starve that cow in the first half of her pregnancy, her heifers will be 10% less fertile than what she was. And we do know that fertility is highly heritable, but we can turn that fertility gene off by starving that cow, and then that will pass on. So say we'll give her an A for fertility, and her heifer will become a B, and that heifer's heifers will be Bs because through the epigenetics we've turned down that fertility gene. And I've seen this for years without knowing the science behind it, and you can have whole runs of cows where, like, even in our herd, so we've got stud numbers, so the 2 4s, there's almost none of them there because they obviously had a tough year when they were in utero, so they haven't gone on to breed repetitively. They're gone, yeah. Then hers becomes a C, yeah. So, normally we think, we focus on, Robin sort of asked, okay, that last 120 days, we need to work on that. But then if we stop working on that after conception, then we take away from it down here. So it's about maintaining, as close as we can to, plus or minus that 1 body score the whole way through that cow's life. We know, particularly with our fixed time AI programs, that cows that are putting on weight are actually more fertile than cows that are fat already. So we don't want over fat cows. Again, we've wasted grass on a fat cow. She's going to melt that weight once she starts lactating. So if we get her too fat in that last pregnancy, even if she doesn't have a dystocia, she's still going to lose those kilos just as fat, and it's not going to transmit to meat on the calf. So we've wasted money on fat.
They can't convert that into like skeletal or muscle development.
No, if they get fat. So, we don't want our cows up here ever. We, ideally, just in this body score 3 to 4. Now, does everybody know how to score a cow body score? No? Yeah, righto. So the easiest way to think of them as probably store, forward store, backward store, fat and thin. So your body score 2.5 to 3 is your store cow. So she's looking all right. She's got a little bit of fleshiness over her ribs. You can maybe just see the bumps on her short ribs and a tiny bit of selvage around her tail. So that's just score 2.5 to 3. Score 4, they're starting to get round all over without having excess fat. Score 5 is a fat cow. We all know what they look like. Yeah. Score 2s, they're getting pretty bony. Sometimes you can see the backbone. Their short ribs are very obvious and there's not much selvage around their tail. Your score 1s, they're your skin and bone cows, they're your crackers. So.
And there's descriptions of these, and there's photos.
Yeah. And I was listening to an audiobook yesterday and talking about like systematic learning, and you put talking about diagnosing stuff in the medical space, and you get a client comes in, they've got these 5 syndromes. So it could be disease X, Y, or Z. So then we run some more tests, and that rules out X and Y, so we know it's got disease Z. And it's the same way we sort of work through all these problems. So you've noticed all these things, and then so it could be all this, and you dive deeper into your data, or you do some testing or whatever, and then you can come up with your answer from that. So it's a matter of just piecing together the puzzles. I often also use an analogy of an onion. You sort of peel back the layers until you get to the core, and then it's not until you put everything together that it makes sense. So. And that's where I think these projects sort of going over those 5 years are so helpful, because you put a little bit together each year, and then by the end, hopefully, the light bulb comes on, and we've got something we can work with into the future from there.
Yeah, and also you can see a bit of it working. So then if you repeat it and it keeps on working, then it sort of gets in your head.
Yep. All right, so we talked about that. So we sort of also mentioned, matching the stock to the feed. We've got our happy paddocks. We've got our paddocks. We're going to feed lick, feed molasses. Our big 3 keys. I really wish I'd put this picture in, because I use it all the time. But we've got thinking about nutritional supplement for cows is like having a wine barrel that's got a few of the leaves that are broken. I think again this came off Future Beef, and for most of us here, our number 1 key limiting factor is energy. So if we haven't got energy, there's no point worrying about calcium, magnesium, or manganese or anything like that. We've got to get our energy levels for our cows right first. So hopefully that's all coming from our grass. If we haven't got grass, are we feeding hay? Are we feeding concentrates, whatever, to get that energy to them? Once we've got our energy sorted, then we've got to look at our protein, because I need that protein for the building blocks for a cow to function and grow. Once you've got your protein and your energy sorted, then the next lever is our phosphorus. And until you've got those 3, there's no point even worrying about how much selenium's in your country, because adding more selenium, if you haven't got energy, it's not going to give you a return on investment. So it's all about getting the levers right, and those macro minerals, they're just little chips off the top of the wine barrel, whereas your energy is a third of the height gone. So making sure you keep those adequately matched. Once again, I'm going to say make sure it's a cost benefit. We talked this morning about when we should be culling our cows in those droughts, rather than trying to provide that energy at an inflated cost that we're not going to get that return. So it may be offload some, offload most, offload all, resume our pastures, start again. But you have to match the energy in the grass versus the energy you can afford to provide to the cows' needs to keep them going forwards. Also, we need to think about our water, so making sure the cows have access to clean water. We don't want to have to walk 10 k's to water because they're going to walk off all that energy to start with. If it's not clean, they're not going to drink enough. They're not going to do well. Keeping the water, keeping the management practices good. So again, we talked about if we had to do an extra round, it's not practical if they've got to walk 20 k's in because you've just whipped 20 kilos off those cows, making them walk in and walk out. Calves are even going to do harder. Looking at the whole process altogether.
What's your thoughts with distance to water with these really hot days like we got in January?
Look, I think they're working. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely within 3 k's of water is ideal. And also, I don't know if I glossed over it, I haven't got there yet, but I do have somewhere on the slide that says need water available for neonates. And Kelvin's father is one of these old-time bushies, he's 88, thank you, who he notices things. And they came from the tablelands before they moved to Muddabara, and he said that up there, calves that drank water died. And in those hot, dry years in Muddabara, all these calves were drinking water, and he's like, they're all going to die, but they were the ones that actually survived. Spyglass has done a research project in the last few years where they looked at, particularly Brahmins, and the amount of milk they produce on day one. So if these cows are a little bit poor, they're not going to produce enough milk on day one, and it takes them up to 3 days to produce enough liquid to keep that calf alive. So that calf can perish before the cow's producing enough milk for him to stay alive. It's not even about the energy or the colostrum or anything else. It's just purely a liquid level. So, if the cows, particularly you've got your poorer Brahman cows, they're not high milk producing cows traditionally. And so having troughs where those calves can drink, we used to do bore drains in that time. So, the calves could go to the bore drain, get a drink, and use the milk to supplement the energy, but the water was what's keeping them alive, not the milk for those first few days until the milk production keeps up.
And that's the problem with the cow, it's always stayed out for 3 days.
Yeah. So we need to So you got those cows. We've got one cow. She's a black cow. She belongs to my daughter. She was a potty that was given to her by one of my clients, and Blackberry takes her calf away for the first 2 or 3 weeks. You just don't see her. I don't know where she hides it, where she gets water, but we'll not see her. Like she's there, nearly ready to have it, and then she's just gone. She'll turn up without the calf, and then she'll go back. But that's the way she rolls. And obviously, she's producing enough milk to keep those calves alive. But if she was a poor old Brahma cow without much milk, that you could easily be losing that calf. So. All right, so for our cows, we need to sort of look at keeping that body condition on them, right throughout the pregnancy. So if they do drop off, if we take the traditional view, she's pregnant, we don't have to worry about her, stop feeding her lick, she'll be fine. If that happens in the first half of the pregnancy, they can actually lose that pregnancy. If they don't lose that pregnancy, we can cause that epigenetic effects that we talked about earlier. And we get into the latter half, we're impacting the egg production for the next pregnancy. So it can take up to 5 months for that egg from the time it leaves, it's released from the ovary and travels through the fallopian tubes into the uterus. It's a 5-month journey for that egg. So we need to be looking after that egg from that point in time. So to get our cows to have a calf every year, she needs to conceive roughly 2 to 4 months after having her calf. So we've got up to 3 months before she calves. We're looking after the next calf as well. So we can so we can use that spike feeding to substantially improve the health of the eggs, but we need to make sure we're not doing it to the fat degree. So I'd probably do that at a lower level than what you're looking at your heifers. So for them, we're trying to grow them, with the cows we're just trying to get them to keep them in that good body score. So ideally, they've got a little bit of green grass coming into the pregnancy, into the parturition. But otherwise, we can throw a bit more MAU or something into that. We talked about that. Going back to the cows not producing enough milk on day one, that late pregnancy nutrition will avoid that problem. Reducing subsequent calf wastage. Talked about the epigenetics, so down to 10 minutes, 10%. Talked about that. With the epigenetics, it also passes on to your steer offspring as well. So steers can be up to 100 kilos per year. So steers brought in from very low producing regions where when they're doing less than 100 kilos per year, won't perform to their genetic merits. So you've got your EBVs, and you say, look, this steer should be this big. If he's come out of hard country, he won't reach those benefits. So obviously, failing nutrition can lead into death of the cow and the calf. Poor colostrum, compromised immune systems, and those calves that aren't getting their colostrum, they can get that black scours, which can lead to them dying. So summary of that. So matching our stock numbers to available feed. We talked about lightening off, moving paddocks as required, 3 Ks water. If we can improve our pastures with legumes, so there's a bit more in the ground, so we don't have to spend money feeding them. Using our weaning and mating management to save the grass. Our dry cow eats less than a wet cow does. Some anything as possible. Culling our cows before they develop a broken mouth. They've got a broken mouth, they can't eat. Pulling them off and segregating based on fetal age if we're doing that, so you can put light cows with light cows and matching them to the pasture. So we'll break again now for another bit of chit chat.